Bill, you can go on and start us.
I'm not seeing your screen, Jim.
Okay, hang on 1 second, and there it goes. You see my screen now, Bill?
I'm not seeing your screen. You know, we've got real slow response. I apologize to everybody that we're having some technical difficulties. The network provider down at St. Simon's has decided to not cooperate with us today. Do you want me to shift over to my screen, Jim?
You can if you will, Bill, and then you can come back to me. I've got show my screen going at this point, and
but we're seeing nothing. You're don't have anything.
All right, and Brenda, I think you can.
There we go. We got it.
Bill, this is Karen. Bill, okay.
Okay.
All right. So let me jump in, Bill, before you speak, and I'll give the apology to everybody that you just put out. It's interesting that we're going to be talking about business intelligence making you so dumb today. We've had 3 separate problems that have occurred today, and we're going to work through it together as a group. That's the joy of crisis management and coming together. Brenda is here from the University of Alabama, and Bill is in Atlanta, and Karen is up in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm down in St. Simon. So we've really kind of covered the Southeast here, I think, as we're focused in on it. And Karen's sick today, so she's going to be with us in and out during the webinar. And I'm going to run it today, but Comcast decided to melt down today in the Southeast, so we don't have Comcast working in the St. Simons area. And so we're using a hotspot on a cell phone, and as we always say, it takes a village, and I think today the village is coming together. So we are going to get started. So Bill, we're going to guess lag time now by what I'm about to do next. I'm going to go to the next slide, which invites everybody to be our friend and to join us, and that you should be seeing Firestorm Social coming up. So Bill, when you see that, that'll give me an indication of how long the lag time is on every slide. And for those of you who are not seeing the screen, it says at Twitter, join us at Firestorm Sol, and on Facebook, Firestorm Solutions, and the hashtag for this section is hashtag Crisis Coach. We do that in every time, and we appreciate you all joining us and speaking with us on a regular basis.
Just got it. Just got it.
Okay, during these broadcasts. So there's about a 15-second lag time. Firestorm transforms crisis into value, and we empower you and others to manage risk and crises. Our expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. And we use the term crisis coach because that describes who we are and what we do. The disclaimer that's given on each of these, and you probably, and Bill, let me know.
Yeah, that one just came up. That was pretty quick.
Okay. All right. So, and the disclaimer is that you've got to hear the oral content when you look at this slide deck later. Any of the work products that we provide you must read in conjunction with guidance from the local and regional authorities, your company's personal legal counsel, and finally that today's broadcast, as all the others, should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. This is part of the webinar series underwritten by the College of Continuing Studies at the University of Alabama. The topic today is why business intelligence makes you so dumb. And by the way, that's clearly how I feel this morning with the hurdles that we've gone through. This is the 5th in our 2016 series, and this series goes back at least 3 years, maybe 4 now, in building the relationship. You can look at Firestorm.com and watch past webinars, and you can register for future webinars in the series. And at the end of today's broadcast, we're going to talk about some things that are coming up in the next few weeks that you want to look at with your organization and share with others. We're very excited about the relationship with the University of Alabama, and in particular, Brenda Trulove, who is the program manager there. And so, Brenda, your picture is going to be coming up in just a second. Why don't you begin your comments, and then I'll advance the slides as you talk, recognizing there's about a 10 to 15-second delay before you see the next slide. So, Brenda, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience as we work through some crisis management ourselves. It's a good practice for us to see can we put into place our backup plans. And so we joked on the phone before y'all came online that Alabama loves to come from behind, so we're doing well this morning. So we thank everyone for...
Brenda, except the University of Alabama is almost always ahead in the games, aren't they?
A lot of times we come from behind, but we get it done. So anyway, corporate engagement in our Bama at Work brand, we're really working hard to get ourselves out into the community, particularly with C-level executives, to let them know that we are here to help them with their pains, whatever problems or issues or workplace challenges that they might have that probably keeps them up at night and gives them a cause for pause and concern, that we're here to help connect resources from the University of Alabama to help them. We work with senior team executives, we work with managers. We really like to work with teams and to help teams function better together through all kinds of body of knowledge practices, including project management, maintenance management, supply chain and logistics. Jim has been a great partner with us with cyber security and business continuity. And also we are always looking to the data to see what our data tells us. So evaluation, measurement, assessments is a big part of the services that we offer. But we're here to help connect the full resources of the university. As today, we all had to pull together to get our webinar going, and sometimes that's what it takes out in the business world. We need to pull together a lot of resources to help individuals and companies be successful. Our corporate engagement division is led by Dr. Robert Prescott, who is a recent 16-year professional in teaching in MBA school. He has a fabulous work career in history as well. And so our group, which is growing, is really getting out there with the community to make sure that we let people know we're here to help. If you're interested in some of our workshop programs that we offer on an ongoing basis, our website is showing on the screen at training.ua.edu. Also showing is my email address, truelove@ccs.ua.edu. And my local telephone number here on campus is 205-348-9066. Right now I'm working on a lot of corporate engagement custom projects for very large corporations and even small corporations. So we're here to help, and I'm sorry that Karen is under the weather today, but we'll all pitch in and help get the message out. So Jim, thanks for your fill-in today as well.
Well, it's my pleasure, and Karen, we're sorry that you're not feeling well with us. She's here in the background, and as I go through the deck, and if I miss things, feel free to comment as you feel. And as we think about business intelligence, it's there are many things that can happen, and there's so much information out there today. And as we think about the rate of change, and as that comes in, it is one of the biggest exposures that we each face in our business. And as we think about intelligence, and most decisions are made outside of a crisis environment or even in a crisis environment, where people are looking for more and more data in order to make their decisions. It seems that when we think about this, that beyond what we do in each of our areas, Hollywood has been a better predictor of things that are occurring than what we've seen from others. It's this rate of change that comes together and this need for intelligence that impacts individuals in making decisions in a crisis. And so that's where we want to hone in on a little bit today. And so when we think about how much content, and in fact, when I saw the deck as it was put together, the 5 extra bytes of content were created between the birth of the world in 2003. That was a term that I was not familiar with. But if you look at the staggering concept, in 2003, that much content was created each single day. So it's going to be impossible to keep up with this flow of information, this flow of content that's going through. And that's going to be the challenge for us to think about making decisions in a crisis and how this environment comes together each and every day. By the way, it made me feel a lot better when I noticed that the amount of content that was there and coming out, that I'm a little behind in my email. I didn't feel nearly as bad, recognizing that there's this much content coming out every single day. We're matching on a daily basis what it took everything to be created by 2003. So when we think about this, and you look at the tiger that's up on the screen, and the thing about there, that curiosity is generally useful, but sometimes there's a difference here, and particularly in a crisis environment where we're forced to make these decisions. And knowing what's there is always a challenge, and we all seek to reduce the uncertainty that's out there to make these decisions. And part of it, and you've heard us do a lot of talking about creating intelligence networks, getting the information to you in a timely manner to be able to reduce those levels of uncertainty. So we adapt to reduce that so that we can deal with the threats that are in front of us and make those particular decisions at each point. So when we fill that information gap, sometimes that can lead us where we don't want to go. It will take us a false sense of direction, and there is this error message that comes in that we think we know more. We think we have more certainty than we actually do. And so it is sometimes difficult to stay on track. Now, when we get to data here, we're used to making decisions in every single way in our lives because we'll get the metrics, we'll get the information, we'll get the content will be shared directly with us. And so we're in an environment that's business as usual. When you look at that number there, with every day we create the 2.5, and look at all those zeros behind it, that many 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, that's just an overwhelming amount of information. And so sorting through all of those things becomes a particular challenge. And when you look at that statistic to the right, 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years alone. That becomes a key driver for us in thinking about it. But when you're in a business that's unusual, and that's a crisis, it's not a normal environment, how does all of this start to come together in those areas? And you look at the statistics of the gigabytes that were being created per day in 1992, scrolling down all the way to 2013 to 28,875 gigabytes a second, and that almost doubling in the next 5 years. It's going to put us in a situation that we're going to be so overwhelmed with information that we won't be able to operate without looking for it. And having responded to numerous crises and events, we find that people are always looking for what's the data, what's the information. And you'll see coming up on your screen an interesting Star Trek side with the seduction of data. And there are two datas they're talking. And how do you know if you're talking to the right data? And while that's comical, and as you think about it, we find that in many times in a crisis, people are focusing on the wrong information. They're focusing on the wrong data to make the critical decisions that they have to in the environment that they're in to keep this process moving forward to come to an optimum situation. You become seduced by the fact that we have to know this. We have to get this thing out. We have to make that statement. And in fact, the best thing you can do in a crisis environment is to slow everything down. And in another webinar, we'll talk about a program called Crisis Stop. And it's stabilizing the event and structuring the environment to make those decisions. So if we think about it, there are lots of types of data that are out there. First are structured data. That's files and information. It's spreadsheets. It's there's a picture coming up on your screen of a file drawer with tabs organized in a variety of ways. And I think a lot of times we look at data as, well, we ought to be able to know. We ought to know what our average cost is on that. What's our man-day loss? What's the impact if we lose that account, what is it going to mean? And those are structured forms of data. In a crisis, generally the types of data that we need aren't going to be there. If we think about unstructured data, and you now see a pile of books and information that are out there, it's hard to classify. We also are looking at data that could be photographs and images and streaming information that are coming in. There's so much out there that it's a scramble. By the way, we were dealing with this unstructured data at the start of this webinar with a sick individual with the inability to upload a file, the loss of a internet provider, how we got the information around and push, and that's typical of a crisis situation. You're forced to deal in an environment where information is going to be at a premium and not in a manner that you could in fact use. Now, we want to throw in dark data, and that's data that's out there that they collect and store for business activity, but they never use it. There's data in your company that you're out there that you don't even know that you have or you don't use, but you continue to collect it. And that slows us down, as the Gartner study has talked about. And Karen put the deck together today, and this has been her idea in streaming it along. And so I think, Karen, I liked your idea where you said you were going to show people a drawing on how to illustrate. And you'll notice that coming up on your screen now, you'll see a very dark screen that's coming up. It's just a black screen there. And by the way, it was very easy for her to draw that within the standpoint, because you don't even know that the information is there. You can't draw on it, but there is a perception by management that they can get access to everything and get access to everything now at that instant in the crisis when it makes such a big difference in making those decisions. So we've got lots of different kinds of data, structured, unstructured, dark data that's hidden there. We've got to focus on how we start to try to manage that and who belongs to the data. And everyone within your organization has access to certain components of that data. And so that's part of the reason when we think about managing a crisis that we're putting together a team, your crisis management team, to focus on those decisions to make sure who's responsible in each one of those areas. And as you focus on that, you see where some of the benefits come in, whether it's the CFO or the HR director and others, to support those decisions that are coming in play. Now, as we think about things that can happen in a crisis, we can have something that can happen to our facility. We can have something that can happen to our information. We can have something that can happen to our people. Those are the three general areas. Now, combined with all of those, we have the potential impact for brand and reputation. So providing the right information to the right people in real time, accurately and adequately, is critical in our normal business operation. But you can imagine in a crisis how much more critical that becomes. Now, there was a study done that you can be led astray, and the study was done by Stanford and Princeton. By the way, Brenda, those are some inferior colleges located elsewhere. I know they're not the University of Alabama, but occasionally it's good to give these second-tier schools a chance to come forward and talk about it. And their premise was that, look, sometimes more data doesn't improve your decision. It may make your decision worse. And this is a study that Karen found, and I think it's a very fascinating and a great example of how data and information can mislead you. And they created a scenario where you had a loan officer who was trying to make a decision, do we grant this loan? And the credit information for the individual was good. Everything looked great on it, except they had failed to make a payment and pay on one loan in their history. And now the question was, do you grant this loan or do you not grant the loan? And over 70%, 71% of the people said, oh, we're not going to grant the loan. They didn't make a loan payment that they should have. That's ground. How do we know they're going to pay us? We're not going to do it. The second test group was given an opportunity to get additional information regarding the loan. And so it was the next day. They couldn't get the information that day, but if they would postpone their decision, they didn't have to make the decision on the loan today. They could postpone it until they got this additional information. And they found out that the additional information on the loan was it was a $5,000 loan that was not paid. And at that point in time, a large group of people decided to go ahead and grant the loan. The key learning position here is that that information didn't help. It didn't change the factors, and there was an illusion that they could, in fact, have made a better decision with that information, and therefore the decision would be better, when in fact it was not. Now, Karen, I know you're listening, and I probably didn't tell the story nearly as well as you did when you were describing it to me earlier, but I think that's the illusion that we really want to put the focus on for the remainder of our discussion today. Karen shared the quote that's coming up on your screen with me a number of weeks ago, and it's really drives at the heart of what Firestorm does and in the crisis environments that we find ourselves. And the quote is from a famous librarian, by the way, not to disparage librarians. I never knew there was a famous librarian, Daniel Boorstin. And it said, the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And when you think about, we don't want to make this a history lesson today, and I'm an engineer and not a historian, but all along, the illusion that, if you would sail your ship, you'd go to the edge of the world and you'd fall off the other side. The Earth is the center of the universe and everything revolves around it. When you look at all of this information, it's the illusion of knowledge. When we walk into a crisis environment, there's an illusion of knowledge. Well, we know what happened. No, you don't. I'm going to tell you right now in advance, almost everything you learn initially in a crisis is wrong. You're forced to make decisions based upon wrong information, and that is a significant problem that you're going to be faced with. But there's this illusion that we know everything, that information is going to come together. And we look at all the information there on the blackboard, and we're going to come to that correct decision. So technology has changed slowly historically. Right now, with all those numbers that we gave you initially, technology is moving literally at the speed of light. And it's evolved. Historically, there's been a period of time for adjustment. So as we have a breakthrough, another thing will come back and to come in place. But today, it's this rate of change that's made so much more information available. And it's going to be really useless for us to start to try to predict what's coming tomorrow. So if you look at trying to make a decision and trying to analyze this in the pressure of a crisis management situation, in the point of time when it's going to make a difference to your brand, your reputation, to your people, to the safety of what's going on, to the financial stability of your company, all that pressure has come together that you're going to have to find a way to make those decisions. So Karen, again, has been very useful. Karen, you're very creative in putting together these graphs and charts. And I think that this graph is certainly as good as the last that you've come up with. And as you see coming up, as the confusion actually increases in direct relationship with how much data that you have. So when you walk into a situation, you walk into a crisis management situation, and we're focused on critical decision support, if you give the group more time, if you extend the runway, you actually are going to get more voices that are going to start to come in. And that will create more confusion associated with it. Karen is very creative, and as you've seen on the next slide, that as this complexity comes in and more information comes available, it doesn't necessarily immediately give you clarity in those situations. And so we've all gone to a restaurant where the menus are in binders and there are multiple pages that you go through, and immediately a number of restaurants that I've gone to come to my mind. And it's the paralysis of analysis that as that comes together, there's just so many pages to move forward. If the menu is simpler and there are only a few choices, it forces you to say, okay, I'm going to have that. And you take and you move on, and it's simplifying it. And so as we think about this overwhelming amount of data, this overwhelming amount of information, you're going to find a way to simplify that in a crisis to make these effective decisions. So if you don't add your insight, if you don't bring your knowledge to the table, then you're not going to have the correct decision. It is going to create a problem. So we talk about the illustration of data without insight, and now we go into looking at risky business decisions and bad decisions. It can come across, and you can get off track from a variety of different points. First of all, you're making assumptions where the data is incorrect. You've got missing data. You've heard us talk in many of our webinars about how do you know what you don't know. And we generally create three buckets. We create a you know what you know what you don't know, but then there's a large bucket, and the biggest risk exposure is what you don't know that you don't know. And so when you look at that, that compounds this, and that can be caused from a lack of visibility into the data without transparency, and a lack of focus. So we get drawn away by that data. The Disraeli quote at the bottom of the slide is interesting, that there are three kinds of lies that are out there. The next slide that comes up talks about a confusion that exists. And there's always a certainty before an event that everybody knows exactly what's going to do. And the little cartoon figures that are there talking about how many emergency exits do we have? Well, I know for certainty that we have 32 exits and 18 are covered by security cameras. But then when the word crisis comes in, where do we go? I have no idea. And that confusion we see repeated over and over, because a crisis is not business as usual. It's business as unusual. And it's hard to describe for you an environment where you can get the feeling for that without going through experiencing a crisis, or this is another reason to underscore the value of doing a test exercise, of going through and making those decisions. So when we think about this, we look at what's out there. We have to get information in, but it's the insights that you add to that information that will create the intelligence that will lead you to actions. So there are two things that's going to happen in a crisis. People are going to want to know, what are we going to do and what are we going to say? If you cut it down in those actions into those two buckets, that's going to simplify where we are and where we need to focus in each one of these things. So you gather the data in, you start to analyze it, you put it into some format or some information that's going to make some sense. You then provide your intelligence, and then you come up with making those decisions and actions that you come here. So a crisis is really involved with making decisions. How do you make them? Well, and remember, everything that you know is wrong, and so you're trying to make decisions based upon wrong information. This is why it's very critical that you have a crisis management plan that divides your decision processes into 5 stages. Pre-action, everything you're doing before the event. Onset, recognition that the crisis is occurring. Impact assessment, how bad is it? And then response and recovery, responding to the crisis, recovering from the crisis. And then the last dimension is post-recovery, in where we're dealing with the consequences associated with it. So when you think about it, what is the decision process? Do you have outside experts? Has your crisis manager managed a crisis? This is not an area for on-the-job training. What additional help do you need to have access to, and what additional intelligence will help you in making these decisions? So when you think about making these decisions in a crisis, the first line on the slide that will be popping up on your screen in the next few minutes is that the information that you've got is wrong. And that's a very difficult thing for leadership to accept. It's almost impossible for them to understand and process that we're not going to get information, that we don't have policies to deal with this. This is a completely new experience for us. We're out at that point in time, because if it was a normal business decision, it would have never risen to this level within it in the organization. Clearly, the normal controls that we have in place aren't going to be there. Our brand and reputation is under attack. and the events are going to be disproportionately large, and they're going to continue to escalate, but we're going to have to make a decision. We can't defer. We have to do those. You've heard me say in other webinars, and I will say it here again, that this is a speed is quality issue. And when I was, the last time a surprise was good was I was 5 and it was my birthday. Well, you know what? In a business environment, if it's coming to you as a surprise, it's not going to be good. You're going to be forced to do with this, and you're going to be at the center of the media attention. So what are you going to do? Wait a minute, there's no information here. We don't have the data to make a decision. We don't know what the impact's going to be if we're going to do that. Karen was also very creative, and once again is going to draw us a picture here that's going to come up and illustrate that. Karen, I think we're going to have to transition you over to graphic artists because these drawings are really phenomenal. And the drawing says here that you can choose. You can do this or you can do that. What I'm going to tell you in advance is you're going to be forced to make decisions between bad options. It's not like here's a really great choice and here's a really bad choice. Pick one. I think I'll take the good choice. I quote my grandfather, which would you rather have, or whipping? Okay, Granddad, I think I'll go with the non-whipping option if it's all the same to you with you. But in this business environment, when you're in a crisis, you're going to be forced to make this decision, whether it's going to be this course of action or that course of action, and then it's going to be absolutely critical that you continue to monitor the impacts and the actions and the information through the process so that you can say, we're going to have to change course. We're going to have to look at those elements. So when you think about making these decisions, there are things that can be put in place in advance, but they're going to have to continue to be developed as the crisis unfolds for you, to be able to target those and recognize that you can intervene and still change the course of the direction that was moving out. I just see, Karen, that you added a quote in from Bill Stanley. Bill Stanley is Chairman and CEO Emeritus of Verity. And the quote there was very gracious by Bill, and sharing how the help came in a crisis. Having outside counsel and judgment are critical in managing a crisis. Now, there is a crisis maturity model when we think about making decisions in a crisis, and as we bring that up, we divide a maturity model, and we do maturity models all the time in a variety of areas. This one is around crisis management, and I think that's the underlying theme of everything we've been talking about today. And at stage one, everything is a liability. Stage 2, you're still in a reaction mode. Stage 3 is pre-action, it's supportive, and finally at stage 4, it's part of your culture and who you are. If you look along the left-hand column and you're thinking about crisis management, you've got the decision process, you've got the roles and responsibilities, the information clarity, the speed of decision-making, and the communications effectiveness. This is your report card. This is where you really want to focus when you're looking at how does our organization make these decisions in a crisis and do that effectively in carrying it through. You'll see descriptions there. Think about your organization and think about how you've seen decisions to be made, and you'll know where you are. Now, if you have any criteria in that first column, you're stage 1. Everything that's coming as a surprise, and all your decisions are going to be a liability. If you've got all of them at least at a level 2, you're still in a reaction mode, and you're kind of at a basic company. I would imagine that most everyone's organization that's on the call today doesn't want to be just kind of ordinary halfway to where they need to be. By the way, Firestorm has reviewed and done benchmarking on hundreds and hundreds, it's probably in the thousands of companies now, doing assessments of their plans and capabilities. I'll share with you 2 interesting numbers. The average school is at 50% of best practices from a preparedness standpoint, and of businesses, in terms of business continuity programs, the average score across all businesses that we've ever done is 43%. So when you think about that, if you were in school, if you got a 43 on a test or a 50% on a test, you are not going to do well, and that's a good example of what's coming in. Now, you can organize that with getting simple directions. This is just a way to organize information on a single sheet, and the flip side of this gave definitions of what these action codes were. But there's always a way to organize information to where it becomes actionable. And this was a particular site that had some complex issues around it, and you can see from the types of exposures and with the action code, so you would immediately know who to contact and what to do, and then the flip side of it sorts together. This became a key part of their culture, and that's the example that Karen was trying to bring together. So what are the next steps? And I think there are a variety of them out there. Karen has listed them nicely for us today about we can assist you with an assessment of where your organization is. You want to look at the data that you have and to create insights and really to have it and establish an intelligence network. How are we going to monitor what's going on as events start to unfold? Obviously, developing the plans to identify with the threats and issues, and training your people. Getting that information in the hands of every employee, an event activation matrix is a great example of that. There's a chance for you, two coming up. Karen's listed the May 25th virtual cyber breach exercise. It's at 2 o'clock Eastern on the 25th. And in June, on I believe it's June 14th at 2 o'clock, there's going to be a communicable illness virtual exercise, and it will be based around Zika. And if you haven't started looking at what's going on there, that creates a different environment for you to look at and having those issues. If you find yourself in the middle of a crisis, you can pick up the phone and give us a call. There is a brief associated with today's webinar, and I would encourage you each to download it. It is at no cost to you. Why does business intelligence make you so dumb? And it's certainly one that you could share, and it'll have highlights from the points that we've talked about today and the experts that Karen has put together to give you that area. So I would encourage you to do that download and take a look at those areas. So Brenda, I'd like to come back to you, and first of all, thanks for the University of Alabama for all that you've done in helping businesses and organizations and schools deal with learning and getting their people all on the same page. Are there particular things that you want to share with us at this point in time?
Well, I just want to let you know that I always learn something, and Karen just did a fabulous job helping all of us see that there's always something new to learn, and as the world and the Internet of Things increases, we just have so many other things that we just really need to expand our own knowledge, and that's what we are here to do, to help businesses stay abreast of the latest, greatest, and I really appreciate all of her hard work in getting this information together for us.
All right, so when Brenda, I think that University of Alabama can customize training for organizations, and so I would encourage you all to reach out to Brenda and the University of Alabama. And Brenda, we appreciate working on those. And I know there's some conferences that you're thinking about this fall in a variety of areas, and we'll share those, I think, in the next month in focusing on whether there are HR issues or other that we can come together. Anything you want to give us to highlight around?
The next real big program that I'm working on is Professionally Speaking in August, and we had about 80 C-level executives attend that last year, and that's where we really are able to talk about being able to speak in public, but also what you say in public when there's a crisis going on. So we'll be working more together on that, Jim, and also on our HR conferences and other material that will be coming out that's available on the website.
Well, thanks, Brenda. And by the way, the networking opportunities to be in those types of groups and to learn makes a big difference. And is equally as important as what to say in a crisis is what not to say. And if you find yourself today looking at, or tomorrow or the next week in a crisis, Focus on why you feel the need to communicate. And until you can answer that question 5 times, until you can slow the world down to say, why are we communicating? And somebody gives you an answer, then you say, why? And then you do that again and again. That single step will improve the accuracy of your decisions and your communications more than anything else that you can do. So I would encourage you, you'll be under pressure to communicate in a crisis. Someone on the board, someone in a senior leadership position is going to make a statement. We need to get out in front of this. We need to frame the issue. We need to get those statements being made when, in fact, you don't. Let's wait. Let's get the right information. And finally, let's communicate directly. Years ago, we had to communicate with others through the media. Today, we don't. We can communicate directly to our stakeholders, and that's going to be very important. You want to use your existing communications channels to go directly to those key stakeholders and deliver your messages as appropriate. So today's recording will be available at Firestorm.com if you want to share that with others in your organization. If you've got questions, you can send us an email at webinars@Firestorm.com, or you can pick up the phone and call us at 800-321-2219. We thank you for your participation today, and if there are particular topics that you'd like to see in the future, feel free to share those with us as we continue to expand and improve our webinar series and continuing education. I would strongly encourage you to get your crisis management teams around the table next week to go through the cyber breach, looking at what the decisions are that you have to take, the messages that you have to send become absolutely critical. And then a few weeks later in June to talk about communicable illness and how that's going to impact you. There's going to be some interesting things that are developed in that, and particularly sharing the impact of Zika and how that's going to come into play. And most of us have not had to sit down and to work through those issues and how they're going to come together and impact our organization. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of information. But you've got to focus on what's going to help us make the best decision at this point in time. Remember, it's the information plus your insight that's equal to intelligence. Don't follow the illusion of knowledge. Make sure that you're focused on the correct areas. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate the time that you've invested today. Look forward to speaking with you in the exercise next week, and then the other series again next month. Have a great day, everyone. Brenda, I'll meet you on our call at the bottom of the half hour here, and we'll catch back up then. And Karen, I hope